Welcome to Beyond the Plates, Industry Talks by Le Cordon Bleu. In this podcast, we get some real insight into the food and hospitality industry from a variety of renowned chefs, industry experts, and Le Cordon Bleu alumni. Join us as we hear the fascinating stories and unique experiences behind some of the best-known names in the industry.
Welcome, Nancy. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a real pleasure to have you.
And it is lovely sort of being with you because
from a distance.
Not quite with you, but looking at you. How about
yes,
that?
Exactly. Well, it's amazing what we can do with technology anyway these days.
Yes.
So, of course, you are an alumni of Le Cordon Bleu.
I am.
And what I'd like to know first really is, when did you realize you wanted to get into the hospitality industry?
So my sort of introduction into cooking, or the cooking world, was, I look at it as kind of a late bloomer, I like to say. And I like to say that because now, or these days, I am meeting so many children under the age of 10 years old that are obsessed with food, eating, and all they do is watch cooking shows, right? And that was not myself. So I had no interest in cooking, no interest in eating until I moved away from home to college. And I went to college thinking that I would come out possibly as a lawyer. And instead, I didn't come out because I dropped out and wanted to cook. I fell in love with that process, the process I'm saying of feeding people, really. And in my college dormitory, I started to cook there, not because of any other reason than it would bring me closer to what I thought was the most handsome man I had ever seen, and he cooked in the dorms. And so I said, the only way to meet him is if I ask him if I can join the kitchen. And that's really what I did. And I worked for one semester only, so that's probably 5 months in the kitchen, cooking for the nightly vegetarian meal, because he was in charge of the vegetarian program. I wasn't even a vegetarian, although I became one for a year. And this was my first semester in college, and I remember so clearly the moment, sort of halfway through that semester's worth of work, that I remember looking up and thinking, I actually enjoy this. I think I want to be a cook.
Fantastic. Yeah, well, that's good. Sometimes the foibles of youth, when you're chasing after a handsome man, actually bring you to an amazing conclusion.
Yep.
So when did you decide to join a culinary school, and how important was it to
Okay. So let's continue that romance, my awakening that, okay, I'm going to be a cook when I grow up, to continuing with my college in the 2 summers. From there, I got jobs back in Los Angeles where I would return for the summer, working in restaurants, which I really loved. And by my senior year, I was in the library writing a paper that I wasn't interested in. And I thought, why am I writing this paper? There's nothing I want to do with the degree. I am going to drop out of school. So I called my parents and I said, I'm not taking my finals and I'm not writing this last paper. I don't want anything with the degree. I want to cook. Now, in those days, it wasn't thought. Cooks, chefs, restaurant owners, whatever it is, that community was not a well-respected community, especially amongst professionals. My father was a lawyer, attorney. My mother was a writer for television. So I could have thrown them off. They could have disowned me. And my father took a deep breath and he said, that sounds fine, as long as you go to the Cordon Bleu. Now, I didn't even know what the Cordon Bleu was. I'd never even heard of it. Somehow he had heard of it. And I thought, okay, it's a cooking school. That's a fair exchange. And I signed up, and at that time, it was the year waiting list. And I know that, and I know when I went, which was in 1977, and I know so well because every person I ran into, I said, I'm going to the Cordon Bleu in 1977. So I can still hear myself repeating that date. But that's really what it was. It was just somehow my father decided it would validate my career choice if I came back with a certificate.
Well, I mean, it's a logical move for a parent who wants to be supportive, but maybe is, it's a good middle ground, I suppose.
Yeah, but we have cooking schools. We had cooking schools in the United States that I didn't even know about. The Culinary Institute of America, a wonderful reputation, was around then. I didn't even know it existed. Madeline Kamen, she had a school. I didn't even know you could go to a cooking school. So so here I left Los Angeles and went over to London.
Did you ever ask him why Le Cordon Bleu specifically?
Because he had heard it, and I don't even know how he knew. But it was one of those places out in the universe that anybody that wants to be something goes to, right? And at that time, my choice was certainly Paris or London, because there are branches now in other places. But I thought, well, it has to be London. I don't speak French.
I mean, that's the logical conclusion anyway.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So after you obviously got your culinary experience and passed out of the Cordon, what was your next move? Was it always your goal to open a restaurant, open several restaurants?
No, and I keep referring to nowadays versus then, but it's just easy to make that reference. Now people know exactly what they do. They either say, I want to own a restaurant, or I want to open a chain, or I want to be a television star, or I want, I didn't think of any of those things because there wasn't really any precedent.
Yeah.
All I thought about is I want to be a cook. I never thought about owning a restaurant. I never thought about being the leader in the kitchen. I just knew I wanted to cook. So my goals were not high up.
You just knew you just needed to prepare food in some capacity. And I mean, reading about your career, it does come across like everything really flowed really naturally and and serendipitously. Is that how it was, or did it kind of present more of a challenge for you?
No, I think it was, and there weren't the challenges. And it's interesting, even talking from the very beginning. Okay, so let's go to the cute guy, right? If I didn't go to school and meet the cute guy, there is no way, I don't think, I would have found myself on cooking. Now, why did I even go to that school? The only reason I went to that school is because my friend was going there. I could have gone to any school, but I didn't. It's like, she said she was going there. It's like, I think I'll go there too then we can hang out, So it's like, I feel like that's how it is. And then I worked, before I went to the Cordon Bleu, and the restaurant I returned to after the Cordon Bleu was a really lovely restaurant in Northern California. It didn't have some of the cachet that some other restaurants had, but it was a really good restaurant. But when I moved back to Los Angeles, I started out at probably one of the hottest restaurants in Los Angeles in that time. And this was in 1979. It was called Michael's Restaurant. And I worked there for just under 2 years. And I could have stayed there forever. But there was a former cook who eventually became my husband, who eventually then became my ex-husband, that was leaving Michael's to go to this new restaurant that was opening up in Spago. And he spent a long time convincing me to go there. I didn't really know Wolfgang Puck. I had no interest in leaving. I was only the assistant pastry chef at Michael, so this would have been the lead pastry chef. But I didn't feel I was ready for it. But I finally, gave in, and I went to Spago. Well, for those of the listeners that don't understand what Spago was in those days and who Wolfgang Puck is, he really put celebrity chefdom on the map. I mean, because of him, he created what became the celebrity chef But then what he did there for me and my career was something that everybody should have the opportunity to work for a Wolfgang Puck in their life, because really that was life-changing. Michael's was great, and it was a hot restaurant, and I could have stayed there forever, but it was really that opportunity. So when you ask your question, did things just fall into place? 100%, they just fell into place, and then we, kind of continue on. I was at Chicago for a couple of years, moved to New York for a year, came back to Los Angeles to open a restaurant. And then I thought, in opening this restaurant, which was called Campanile, which was also kind of a groundbreaking, great restaurant at the time. Now we're all the way in 1989. But before we opened Campanile, my then husband and I thought, I got to find a place that I can also make some bread. Bread is such an important part of the meal. And there were no choices at that time in Los Angeles. And we had found an original spot for a restaurant that wouldn't have had enough space to also have a little bakery on the premise. And I thought, well, in time, I will do that. And for whatever reason, I know the reason, couldn't sign a lease on that building because the owner of the building didn't do work during the time that Mercury was in retrograde, and that's when it was. So we had 2 weeks, and during those of downtime, where my mom said, I found another building, and I think there's plenty of room for a bakery. And so found it, loved the space, decided to open our restaurant and bakery there. And that continued to be such a big part of my career, was that bread baking component that probably wouldn't have happened had I signed that earlier lease in a space that didn't have enough room. So, yeah, I tell you, you just got to really go with those, go where your life takes you.
Absolutely. It's fascinating. It really does feel like fate or serendipity, just those chain of events that lead to where you are now.
Yeah.
So would you say there's one point in your career that you're particularly proud of and where you thought, this is it, I've really made it now? Or is that yet to happen?
Right. That's yet to happen, I'll tell you. But there has been a few things that have happened along the way that it's like, wow, one thing is the most recent was not only the opportunity, but my actual saying, I'll do it, was the experience I had with the chef's table. And I was really reluctant to do that, not because I'm camera shy or anything like that. And it's not the commitment to time. They wanted 10 days, but more so that I didn't really feel I had a story to talk about, and they're produced so beautifully.
Yeah.
But the staff was really excited about that opportunity. And I thought, okay, for them, I'm just going to do it, which I did. And I didn't realize what the effect that would be, or the lasting effect. I mean, that came out, I don't know how many years ago, but a while ago. And still, people stop me on the street. People come into the restaurant, and all they ever say is, I watched your chef's table. Yeah. So that was, another example of embracing an opportunity and it being such a positive one, because it was. I mean, it still brings me so much business to my restaurants. So that was, and then I think, but personally, the most satisfying part of my whole career is when I finally feel like I discovered a little bit about how to make a loaf of bread, And when I did that in 1989, even though it doesn't sound that long ago when I opened the bakery in 1989, it wasn't like it is, there weren't the resources that there are today. So there weren't the books to turn to. There weren't the bakers to talk to, right? Very big. I always say now, there is not an excuse for somebody to make a bad loaf of bread. There's YouTube. There's a plethora of books to talk to and an equal amount of bakers to pick their brain. There's no reason, like when I walk into, say, a bakery, or a restaurant that's making their own bread and it's clearly subpar, I'm like, you didn't do your homework because it's all available. But back in those days, it really wasn't. I needed to start out with a handful of this and a tablespoon of this. And by trial and error, and my relationship with that process, how difficult it was and how challenging at the end. And again, it's not the end because that never changes. Even though I don't bake anymore, I don't bake bread anymore because I just don't have the opportunity to. But I still think of it's not finished. I didn't learn everything there is to learn. But the process was probably the most difficult and the most rewarding process that there could be.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, for sure. I mean, you think about, we were, looking at some archive stuff from the Cordon Bleu, and it's so vastly different to what is available now. And you think about huge volumes of thick cookbooks of everything that you need to know, which is impossible to kind of work your way through. And now just literally Google it. And it's fantastic. It's amazing, what you can do now. So different. Okay. So I would like to know, what drew you to focus on Italian cuisine in particular for your restaurant?
First of all, when I think of, I know that let me just go back a little bit in my history. When I left New York and I left a restaurant that I had gone there to sort of revamp and work on. Yeah. And in the interim, went to Italy and rented a house. Went to Italy just because I had been there before. It seemed like a good place to spend a month with two young kids. And so that's what I did. Went to Italy, and it was the first time in my relationship, not only with my then husband and then and with my kids, that we got to cook together and eat together. Because my daughter was born, first year Spago opened, and my son was born just as we were moving to New York to open this other restaurant. And so my life was pretty much consumed with work, right? So when we rent a house, we have time to cook and eat together, and happened to rent it in Tuscany. So, when we think of Italian food, we have to always remember and respect the fact that it's regional cooking. And so when I say that I cook a certain way, it's because that's the region that I know the best, which is the Tuscany Umbrian region. There's all sorts of, food in the rest of Italy. So we're just talking about that. And I fell in love with not only about the simplicity of the food that I was eating then, but also the vibrant flavors and the very simple cooking techniques. So that's what I fell in love with. The flavor, the simplicity, the tradition, the passion. That is what I felt was lacking in what I was eating in Los Angeles. So when I opened my first restaurant, which was Campanile, even though it had an Italian name, and we did have some pasta on the menu, we didn't think of it as an Italian restaurant. Thought of it more as a local restaurant with some of those influences of Italian, but we never called it an Italian restaurant. And then when I left Campanile and joined my new partnership, it was clearly fitting under the family of Italian restaurants. And with the help of my partners, they were able to teach and guide me into much more of an Italian cook than I was before. I still don't think of myself as an Italian cook, but I do feel like I borrow a lot from Italian food and flavors and spirit and sort of put it back together in my way. If that makes sense.
Of course, yeah. I think it's, it's absolutely acceptable to pay homage to a cuisine without, claiming it as your own.
Yeah. And sometimes I laugh at myself and I think the Italians would be horrified if they saw what I was doing right now, because, when you are in Italy, and I spend a lot of time there now, and you cook and you meet Italians, right? And you serve any Italian man anything, and the first thing he'll say is, "That's not the way my mother does it." So
of course, yeah.
I offend people in the process, let's say, but hopefully it tastes good while I'm doing it.
I'm sure. And you can't help that they're purists.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So this might be a cheeky question, I'm not sure, but you have a new book coming out next year?
Yes.
Can you tell us something about it?
Yeah, I can. So, writing a cookbook is like having children. Every time you write, but now I only have 2 children, by the way, and I have 10 cookbooks, but every time, when I remember after having my first child, right, it's like, never again, never will I go through the process of birth. And it's kind of like the cookbook. Okay, this is my last one, And then all of a sudden, as the memory gets a little faded, you think, I have one more thing to say. So I've never done a cookbook that's just like part 2, like the Brea Bakery bread, then the new La Brea Bakery bread. So it's always a completely different subject. So after my last book, which was not the one coming out next year, but the Chi Spacca cookbook, which was my 3rd restaurant that I have here on the corner, I thought, that's it. I've gone through my pastries. I've gone through my bread. I've gone through food coming from packages. I've gone through sandwiches, all my restaurants. That's it. I don't think I have another book in me, right? And then I made a peanut butter cookie. And by the way, the book is supposed to be called, we'll see if the marketing team will allow it, it's supposed to be called The Peanut Butter Cookie That Changed My Life. So I made this peanut butter cookie, and after it came out of the oven, I patted myself on the back and I said, not only is this the most delicious peanut butter cookie I ever made, it is the most beautiful peanut butter cookie I've ever seen.
Wow. And
so with that, I thought, what I would really love is a book that filled in that cover is all the baking recipes that I really want to probably make, that I don't have to search the internet, that I don't have to start pulling my cookbooks off the shelf, right? So in this book is nothing that is innovative, nothing, everything. That's so funny. I need to edit it. Here's, I'm just showing you, because I know this is not visual. This is just for you. See the title. There you go. The peanut butter cookie that changed my life. Anyway, because I'm at the final edit. So, but So basically, it's like everything you probably want to make, and it has a name. So, and that's what's in it. So, peanut butter cookie, a chocolate chip cookie, a brownie, some of the names they're more American that maybe your listeners want. German chocolate cake, Well, there is a sticky toffee pudding, but everything that people can relate to that want the best version of that. And so that's what this is. Yeah. Nothing plated, by the way. Nothing, it's just whole desserts, a carrot cake, But I just made so many versions until I thought, okay, that's the best version I've eaten. And then it would go into the book. So what started out to be what I thought a very, very simple book, an easy book, because again, I'm not plating it. There's no components that I have to think about. I don't have to think about, anything about it. Turned out to be such a struggle. I ate nothing but sugar for a year, but it's over. And I'm really excited about this book coming out, because I also then talked the publisher into allowing me to photograph every single recipe. Oh, wow. So if there's a picture for every single one, so you'll be able to say, oh, that looks good.
That sounds amazing. Sounds like a real encyclopedia of baked goods.
Yes.
Wonderful. Oh, well, that's really exciting. Thank you so much for sharing, a little bit of an insight about that.
Yeah.
Very, very exciting. So I'm going to move on a little bit to some questions just about the industry in general. Obviously, I think worldwide it's been a tumultuous time, and a lot has changed over the past couple of years, including, work-life balance and opinions on gender equality and the different varieties of cuisine that are available, plant-based food, that sort of thing. And I just wondered what kind of changes you observed, especially within the States as well. It's different, and you have businesses around the world, but you must have kind of quite a broad insight into this.
Yeah, look, there's no question that there have not been a lot of challenges in all industries, right? But knowing the restaurant industry, I'm saying ours was the hardest hit. I don't know. I don't have any fact to back that up. I'm just saying it was very hard hit. But okay, one thing is you want to always try to bring in a little bit of the positive, right? So a little bit of the positive is that I found that our industry was able to adapt. That's nice. We were given a bad deal and we made the best of it, right? And I think that was really good. And that you continue to see, in all the reasons, in all the ways that everybody knows. We adapted to having, seating outside. We adapted to much less people in the kitchen. We really adapted with the challenges of packing only food to go for so long. If you're a restaurateur that never had a to-go business, right? That's really a challenge. And yet we all did it to get through. I think we all didn't realize, but it was definitely confirmed how much we appreciate and value the people that come to work every day, right? Yeah. Because we really needed them and they really came through, right? We adapted with a lot of the product. A lot of the product we were using and used to using was no longer available. And that still is the case. It's really hard. A delivery is really hard. Staffing is very hard now. So many people have left our industry realizing that it's a tough way to work. And a lot of people found work in this industry, but in a more lucrative positions, like being private chefs, things like that. Yeah. So it's still a struggle, but I think that if it's an industry that you love and believe in, then you stick with it.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think that's true. And, maybe it filters out the people who kind of are doing it for the wrong reasons or are doing it just as a time. So we're left with the cream.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you predict, or what are your hopes for the future of hospitality?
Well, I would think that I got so out of the habit of sort of eating out in other restaurants. I just, because they weren't available to me, I would go in and there wasn't that special vibe, at the very beginning. It was crazy. I don't know how it was in London because I wasn't there, but when you first came to restaurants were first allowed to open indoors, there were so many restrictions, like the seating had to be so far apart. There couldn't be music because they didn't want people staying too long or talking too loud over the music. There couldn't be anything on the tables, right? And so it was not, I didn't find it special to go out. So and I know a lot of other people that kind of got out of the habit. So one of my predictions, or what is my hope, is that comes back and that people sort of learn to do without. So let's just, for an example, say you couldn't have anything on the table. So people no longer had flowers or candles on the table, let's suppose. And then they realized, hey, if I don't have candles or flowers on the table, I save X amount of dollars. Maybe I'll never put candles and flowers on the table, So is that good? Well, maybe it's good to a certain extent, but then also, does it mean that you lost whatever the beautiful part of coming into your restaurant? So I think I would love that people just come back to putting effort into the vibe of the place, what the place looks like,
Yeah.
And realizing that even though they were able to do without, maybe it's time to kind of give back to where, your environment.
Absolutely. Get rid of that clinical feel that pandemic, for sure. And finally, are there any key trends on your radar?
Wow.
Anything you think is going to be hot?
It's so funny because I've always been off that radar. I kind of like what I like. So we certainly, what I see around me, and I don't know if it's a trend, but definitely more casual restaurants are opening up much quicker and faster than ones that take much more of a commitment, both from your pocket, your time, right, and the expertise. So I'm finding that is if it's a trend, I don't know, but it's definitely, I see it much more.
Yeah, I think so too here as well. Even fine dining is bringing slightly more element. People just aren't looking for that really stiff fine dining. No, excellent. Well, nothing much else to say, but thank you ever so much. It's been such a pleasure.
A pleasure.
You're a real icon, what you do and how you dress, for me particularly. But yeah, it's wonderful to talk to you, and thank you on behalf of me and our audience.
Thank you, and I love being back in London. So
good. Well, you'll have to swing by next time you're.
Yeah. Please, I'll be there next week. So at the Pizzeria Mozza. So
wonderful. Yeah.
Great.
Well, thank you, Nancy. This has been really, really exciting for me and really special. So thank you for taking the time to be on the show. We appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
And, I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Beyond the Plate, Industry Talks by Le Cordon Bleu. Keep up to date with all our news and episodes by following us on social media or by signing up to our newsletter. Links are included in the episode notes. Until next time, a bientôt!